So I thought that's too many variables that won't necessarily sync up. But it was incredible. So they spent their time doing it. I was standing there watching it with the special effects team, looking at it going, I wonder where it will go. And it went exactly where they wanted it to go. It was outrageous, and it looked absolutely brutal. So yeah, got to work on the Ferrari movie, which is amazing, and that was effectively it was a reprisal of my role from Ford versus Ferrari. In fact, some of my dialogue was practically the same. Brake failure seems to be something that my characters suffer from in the movies I've worked on camera. Robert Nagle, friend of mine who's a great stunt coordinator and has done some incredible work. Baby Driver is one of his most famous things, that crazy sequence, which was mapped out in time to music. He's extremely technical. He's worked on some of his most amazing rigs. Famously, the one where Tom Cruise is on a bike in one of the missions, and if you watch him through that canyon, the bike's cranking left and right. He's got no helmet, and you just think, how is this happening? It looks completely real, and part of it is real, but it's connected to a rig that Nagle had designed that could whistle him through, and the rig is enormous, this massive truck with gimbals and all sorts of technical things. He's a mastermind of choreographing great action, but also he's really good on the technical side and how the cameras work, but also getting the cars to dance around. So it was great. So Ford versus Ferrari with him was really cool. He had like an NFL playbook that he used so that everybody knew what they were doing, but it was like, like a Bible. So he'd mapped out everything. And for Ferrari, we kind of brought the team back together, and that was pretty amazing. The difference we tried to make was to get some more time spent on getting the cars to be able to move around in the way we wanted and get a heads up on that. So I was able to introduce him to some really good technicians who came in to make these what would look like the old Ferraris, but to be able to handle and not cost millions of dollars, because you're trying to get the original cars would have cost an absolute fortune. And so actually, almost everything you see in the film is basically a caterum. So the chassis were lengthened, but everything in the drivetrain, the engines and everything were caterums, and they were fantastic. So if you've never driven one, they're very low to the ground like the original Ferrari race cars. They dance around, rear-wheel drive, manual shift, and plenty of power and enough to break traction. And when you put the skinny wheels on, the period correct looking wheels, which were with the right grooves and everything, these things were fantastic. So I went in as a stunt driver to work on that part of the team. And then they were looking for, potentially who could be cast to appear on camera. And for me, got the dream ticket was to appear as Stirling Moss. It was a huge hero of mine. I got to learn a lot more about him doing the research on the Aston Martin book that I wrote. Not been really aware enough of his achievements. Famously, he didn't win the Formula One championship, but equally famously, he was one of the most gracious drivers and actually gave away the championship by defending another driver who he was battling with, Hawthorne, who had, I think he'd reversed on the track or something like this, and he was going to lose by a point to Stirling. And Stirling fought for him to help him get that point that then cost him the championship, which is ironic. But if you look at his career and his record, and I went to town doing the research about what he'd achieved, and when he was Fangio's teammate, Stirling Moss was an incredibly unique individual. When Fangio was asked a few times, who's the best driver of your era, and without hesitation, he would say Stirling Moss. So Moss was his teammate, and I think that probably the reason Fangio was able to win so many championships, other than being an incredible driver, was that his main rival was his teammate and was willing to be the number two and learn from the great man. He was really incredible. So when at the Aston Martin environment, he was free to drive as fast as he could, and his times are ridiculously fast, multiple seconds faster than the teammates. And at the Nürburgring, where he was racing there, and it was a physical challenge as well as a sort of speed challenge, he was kind of unparalleled because he was the first really racing driver athlete, which is something I didn't know until I'd really researched him. And in a way that probably would have been a standout in his day, but wouldn't stand out now, but he rehearsed everything, so he was meticulous. And in the days when he had to run to the car, he was a fast sprinter, and he practiced this, and he had it dialed in so he could jump in and with a single leap would be gone. So he nearly always won the getaway starts at places like Le Mans. Even if he didn't qualify on pole, he would be in the car first and out. And perhaps some of the others who had a bit too much champagne the night before or even on the morning, which is how they kind of rolled back in the day, couldn't keep up with him. So Stirling, pretty epic. And also his car control was really something that was unrivaled. I mean, Fangio was another that could do that four-wheel drift that they would put the cars into to skate them through the corner. But I think those two were probably the best at it in their era. And if you watch the footage or you look at photographs of Stirling, the nose of the car is always shaving the apex or the wall or the hay bale that they used to have. And this beautiful kind of four-wheel drift where it's not a drift, where you go slower because the fastest way through is to cut the apex and better get the traction on the way out. He had that kind of perfect balance, the hand-eye coordination to have that on point. So that's something you want to replicate, to try and make it look right. You know, I've enjoyed all different genres of driving, from racing, where you're very tidy, very neat, and clinical, and it's about the lap time only, nothing else matters, doesn't matter how it looks, just as long as it's fast. Movies, Top Gear, TV, it's to make it look better. You know, as both, as a Stig, obviously, it was about the lap time, but then, you know, I would be doing other stuff where you slide the car. It was fun to be able to merge those two things together and then go for it and be Stirling. So the way that the cars looked, I think the scenes in Italy, that we shot them in situ, I thought that it looked fantastic. I felt that we were there. You wear the old get-ups and clothing and stuff and the helmets. I think the fact that I was a little bit taller than Stirling, I felt slightly uncomfortable that this didn't really represent him. But I just thought, you know what, just drive it really as hard as possible, because that was his nature. So I think on that front, it worked out pretty well. And I had Jenks, you know, in the passenger seat, who had a bolt-on beard with the glue and stuff, which up close is pretty hysterical. And this poor man, you know, had to sit there the entire time, and I was like, you know, sliding around, and Stirling's cutting through. On one of the scenes, it was in the night. The lights weren't amazing on the cars, and it was absolutely hammering with rain. We're doing these really high-speed chases past the camera and everything. This poor man's still stuck there, hanging on for dear life. But yeah, I had a couple of lines which I managed to deliver over the sort of scream of the engine, which just about passed muster with Michael Mann. And Michael Mann, the director, I've watched his movies. I absolutely love his films, and you know, he is an absolute craftsman with how he sets the scene. You know, one of my favourite films is Heat, but he's done other great movies. Last of the Mohicans, another one that's great. Collateral. So, you know, I was expecting he would be pretty exacting and demanding, but it's still, we had to do a crash scene. So in, you know, real life, Moss lost his brakes. Famously, the pedal snapped off and he veered off into a field. I can't remember actually back in history exactly where he ended up, but he lost his brakes. So we had to simulate that. There was a big divot in the road when you left the road, which I was trying to sort of avoid that. Anyway, bounced into the field, landed, and had to do a line sort of about the brakes snapping off. And it's just that moment when you get a big Hollywood director saying one more time, you know, oh, he's not happy with the first one. I've got to change it. And it's very subtle stuff he's changing. And I'm sure actors are brilliant at this. But for me, this was quite stressful to try and just get the pitch right and to really relate to what he was telling me to do. And I just sort of, in the back of my head, it's probably because I've watched too many spoof Hollywood things like Tropic Thunder, where the director loses his mind and starts screaming. I was expecting him to start screaming, like, get it right, you know, what are you doing? But I think it was about fourth or fifth go, at this very small line that I seemed to be getting wrong, he signed off on it. So I was so relieved. And that was fine. It was more stressful than any of the driving that we did. So it was cool. I was just trying to keep the man happy. But yeah, he was pretty intense. But I think the film looks beautiful. Adam Driver is an incredible actor. Seeing how he did his stuff. We had Jack O'Connell, young British actor who's brilliant, playing Peter Collins. Patrick Dempsey, who was just the cat that got the cream. He loves motorsport. He was so excited to be there. But I also felt for him in that, you know, he was expecting this was like a race, but actually it's a stunt sequence. So he was in the middle of a lot of hustle and bustle. It was a different experience for him too, but it worked out really well. And I thought, yeah, obviously the clothing you wear, the way that the cars look, the way they drive, that kind of, I think, immerses you in the experience of what it was like back in the day. But being in Reggio Emilia, was the region we were in, shooting on those roads and living there for 2 months or whatever it was whilst we shot it, you do get into it, and just the Italian lifestyle, and they're setting fire to their pasta carbonara and all the tricks. The guys running the restaurants there were just so funny. I think we really felt like we were part of Ferrari. So it was great, and Modena is a beautiful town, and it's sort of imbuing all this Ferrari culture. And although it wasn't, I know the film wasn't sort of endorsed by Ferrari, I think we did as close as we could to make it feel real. So yeah, there's the big crash, which was pretty gnarly. Obviously tragic because it was a huge loss of life back in the day. So as you're filming that stuff, you're very respectful to what actually happened. How they achieved that was pretty remarkable, because it wouldn't be survivable for a stuntman, and stunt drivers will do quite unbelievable things. You watch Talladega Nights, there's a huge wreck, and the car cartwheels down the track. I think that stunt was organised by Andy Gill, and it didn't get put up for an award. And I think he said, oh, this was pretty cool. And they're like, well, there wasn't a person in that. And he said, well, there was. So you watch a lot of movies, and you're like, oh, there's no one in that car. There usually is. And so it's very well organised. The safety side of it has to be really right. But for this one, the car was going to be completely destroyed and it would not be survivable. So they used really interesting crash recreation system with a cable to show the car where it was going, the robot inside it effectively, with actuators using the clutch and the pedals to make it go up to speed. But it also had to do a cannon, so normally that's a person, you press a button at the right time, get it into some yaw, and then you fire a cannon, a slug of metal goes in the ground and it cartwheels. So I thought that's too many variables that won't necessarily sync up. But it was incredible. So they spent their time doing it. I was standing there watching it with the special effects team, looking at it going, I wonder where it will go. And it went exactly where they wanted it to go. It was outrageous, and it looked absolutely brutal. So the car took off at sort of 90, 100 miles an hour, cartwheel through the air. It was crazy. There was a dummy in it that flew out. It was, pretty ghoulish, and landed. So I thought it kind of looked perfect. But then there's a little bit they added with some CGI with the telegraph pole, which seemed a little bit PlayStation. I wasn't so sure about that part, but I thought it was really well captured. And actually the hardest thing was for me the bit I did was the lead up to that crash, and what historically they believed was the cause of it, which was a puncture, where the wheel hit a broken cat's eye and the metal speared into the tyre. So that was something that Mann wanted to have really close up. Problem with that is that you had the camera literally, the cat's eye was like this, and the camera was literally behind it. But the front tyre had to hit that spike, but the rear wheel was wider than the front, so I would hit the camera. So we had to kind of, with Nagle, who was very patient and on it, we had to kind of come up with some sort of Top Gun signals to sort of navigate, so I could see. So you can't see, but you're sitting in the car quite a long way back. The hood of the car is very long, so you can't see the wheels all hidden. So just getting it on target was one thing. And they were shooting it in super slow-mo to get that moment of it whacking the tyre. Anyway, and we just had it so that I would run it over at speed and then just about jink around the camera to get the shot. It was really technical, but really fun. It was a big challenge. It's no sense of risk, but it's just risk of damage. So your adrenaline is very high for that. But it was definitely a team effort. I was, of course we got the shot, and then we had to do it twice, which is always the way. So it was cool to get that one in the can. But I thought as a section, it was incredibly visceral, horrific to watch. And I know it's part of the story of that race. Amelia Amelia was an incredibly dangerous endeavour. Cars flew off the road. They didn't wear seatbelts for a reason, because they were better off being thrown from the car. Better chance of survival. It's pretty wild.
Once again, I want to thank Bridgestone for their support of VINwiki this month, for their support of the channel, and all they're going to do with us throughout the year. We're going to test some tires, use some tires, and have them talk about what the tire business is like from their perspective, and all the great things that Bridgestone is doing as a brand, including becoming an OEM offering on cars like Porsches, Lamborghinis, and things like that in the past couple of years. And so I know that you're going to love that, but I know that you'll also love their tires. And so whether you go to Tire Rack and order a set of Bridgestones for your car, or also check them out at the link in the description below, check out the Potenza range of tires for road cars, supercars, sports cars, hypercars. They are amazing, and I know they'll treat you well. Have a great day.